All right, everybody. Live reaction videos. This is like new for me. I've done a couple of them, but here we are. Here we are again. So, yeah, Eric Hovind. So he's doing the whole Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, only talk to teenagers and or old teenagers and young 20-year-olds about something. There's no better way to preserve your ego than only dealing with people that are, you know, kind of ignorant. Says the guy who debates idiots on TikTok, I guess. But I'm taking all I can. We don't have a big college in the town I live in. It'd be interesting to go. Maybe I'll just start going to churches. Maybe I'll just set up a booth in front of all the churches and say evolution is proven. Prove me wrong, and then record. No, I would never do something like that. But anyways, let's get started here. So
here's the argument we're making. We're saying evolution is impossible, and we're willing to put $1,000 on the line for someone to disprove us. Okay?
That's $200 that he's holding right there. I don't know how well you can see, but it's definitely $200. So he's already lying.
Okay. We're using an argument actually developed by an evolutionary geneticist. This isn't our original argument.
An evolutionary geneticist who, if he's an evolutionary geneticist, then wouldn't that mean he believes in evolution? So his argument can't possibly refute evolution.
Okay. The evolutionary geneticist said, what would it take to go from an ape-like creature to a human being?
A human being is an ape-like creature. Why do they even try? I don't understand. The guy they're talking about is Haldane. Let me look up his actual first name because I don't know. JBS Haldane. Okay, JBS Haldane. And was this guy? I mean, he believed in evolution, right? We're gonna go through and we're gonna find this out. JBS Haldane. Wikipedia, the most reputable of all sources in the world. Evolution, is a believer in evolutionary biology. Royal Institution. So he's the guy that came up with the primordial soup theory? That's interesting. I never heard that before. Everybody always says that, or well, a lot of the people I talk to say that that was Darwin's idea. Reject. So the word reject pops up once, so I don't think we're going to see anything on here about him rejecting Darwinian evolution or anything like that. In 1957, Haldane articulated Haldane's dilemma, a limit on the speed of beneficial evolution, an idea that is still debated today, so on and so forth. He coined the term clone? Interesting. Huh. I've almost never heard of this guy, or I've practically never heard of him before, but here he is with all these ideas I've heard of. Well, anyways.
And he's just looking at the stats, the mathematics, the science that we know. This isn't interpretation of the data. This is just the data. So scientists look at data and interpret it. I look at data, I interpret it. This is just the data, okay? That's all we're looking at. The data would say that an ape-like creature and a human being are about how different. What percentage are genetics different from one another? Do you know the answer to that?
Less than 2%.
Can you go ahead and tell me?
Yeah. Currently, they would say it's about 15% different.
No, they do not say that. Nobody says that except for, I can't remember his name, but there's this, he works for the Discovery Institute or something like that. I don't remember, but Erica Gutsick Gibbon, she's done these great videos where she goes over how this guy's methodology is just totally garbage, and she does these like 4-hour videos where she actually goes into the genomes and shows you how to do the calculations and how the calculations are made and how they're faulty. So yeah, I've heard of this before. Actually, we're only about 85% similar. First of all, the method is junk. Second of all, it actually even if we adopted the junk method, it's not a problem, because it's still like it would only be a problem if they somehow discovered, hey, we've been looking at DNA all wrong, and turns out that the evolutionary relationships predicted by genetics don't follow at all, which would mean, let's say the ape human, which we are apes, but whatever, the chimpanzee human match is only like 85%, but then the human match with, I don't know, bananas is like 95%. Then it would be like, okay, the model that we presented is not giving any accurate predictions. It still continues, and she's done the data on this too. Even if you follow this crappy sequencing method or whatever it is, you still end up with the animals are less closely related than the traditional methods yield, but they're still always more closely related to each other than they are to any other form of life, so on and so forth. I think there's actually more than one case of them doing this, but as far as why the method sucks, for the one I can remember at least, what the guy did was when we compare DNA or genomes, we don't compare the entire genome. We compare sections of it at a time. And what this guy did was he weighed his comparison method in a completely dishonest way, because what he would do is he would weigh small sections against very large sections exactly the same way. So let's say, can I do this off the top of my head? I'm not really sure. Let's say you have a small section of DNA comparing between two species, and they are, let's say, 0% the same. To make this easy for me, two small sections are 0% the same, and then two gigantic sections are 100% the same. So what he did is he weighed them equally. So if one is 0 and the other is 100, then the average of that is 50. But hopefully you can see how incredibly dishonest that is, because one section is very short and the other section is very long. So in reality, they would be much, much, much greater than 50. It would be like essentially guaranteed to be more than 50, but less than 100%, right? But it would be in that neighborhood of, in the 80s or 90s or whatever. So by weighing the sequences, the sequence pieces, so dishonestly like that, that's one of the ways they get the numbers down. So, yeah. Liars. Incompetent liars, like always.
Okay. They used to say 4 to 5. Before that, they said 2. Before that, they said only 1%. So we're going to go with the just 1% to make evolution even easier, more plausible.
You can go with, you can even round it up to 2%. That's kind of where the numbers sort of are right now.
Okay.
Step number 2, how many base pairs are in the human genome? How many base pairs do we have in our genetics? Do you happen to know the answer to that?
It's like 7 billion. They're going to say, okay, so this is kind of weird. Well, no, hold on. No, yeah, it would be about 3.5 billion. My bad, because he said base pairs. So in total, like the nucleotide molecules, there's about 7 billion, but because they're paired, base pair, yeah, about 3.5 billion.
Is it the 3 billion?
That's the 3 billion base pairs. Well, if we are only 1% different, and there's 3 billion base pairs, how many genetic changes need to take place in order to go from an ape-like creature to a human being?
30 million?
30 million.
No, because no, that's not the case at all. Because literally all an ape-like creature to a humans are ape-like creatures in the first place. But no, there have been many my mind is actually racing right now because there are so many problems with this, and new ones keep popping up every time I speak. So this is literally the argument. It's not very obvious. I didn't realize it right away, but this is the if humans came from chimpanzees, why are there still chimpanzees argument? Because he's taking the difference between us and chimps and saying how many changes to their genome would it take to produce us, and it's this 30 million base pairs or whatever. We don't come from apes or from chimpanzees, Eric. Jeez. So, there's problem number 1. Problem number 2 would be, like, we know that us and chimpanzees share genes that are exactly the same, right? So it's not like it's not like the changes, I don't want to say this. The changes in the genome between us and them, it's not like, well, I guess this would be fair for what he's saying, because some parts of it can remain identical and then other parts of it change. So never mind what I was going to say there. But no, several, like, all humans are different, and there have been other human species like Homo erectus and so on. And so they would presumably perhaps have actually fewer differences with our primitive ape-like ancestors than we do. So there are so many problems all around. Cam the man, Fernandez, that's quite the name. Cats and tigers are also like 70-something% related when using this faulty method. Yeah, with the faulty or the traditional method, what's really hilarious is either way, you find that things that creationists call part of the same kind are drastically less related than we are with chimps, for example. So I know the foxes and wolves number is about 75%. So foxes and wolves are both in the dog kind, but they're 25, like they're only 75% the same. Whereas us and chimps, we're 98.6% the same, but we're somehow not in the same kind. So they argue that you can use DNA to establish these relationships for literally everything except us. So they pretend to be using science, but they're against science in every way.
So we've got to make 30 million genetic changes. Haldane, the guy who discovered this, asked the question, how long would that take? So now we look at the next section, how long?
Yeah, so you don't need all 30 million because there have been other species of humans besides only us, but we can just go with that number.
How long would it take to do that? Well, first of all, we have to know how long would it take for one beneficial mutation to become fixed in the environment? Emma, if you had a beneficial mutation that the whole population needed, how many generations would it take before your beneficial mutation now permeates the entire world's population of humans?
Would it be one? Or?
Not one, because as soon as you have a child, that doesn't mean that if that beneficial mutation is passed on, everybody else doesn't have it yet.
Okay.
I mean, so one thing I should say is Haldane, he wrote this argument in 1957. They so often use very outdated arguments and evidences and things like they pretend that, oh, Piltdown Man, that was a hoax, and ever since, and like as if that disproves anything, as if we haven't discovered anything else since then, or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, what we knew about genetics was so incredibly low resolution. Excuse me, was so incredibly low resolution in 1957. And again, Haldane's not disproving evolution. He's an evolutionary biologist, or was. I assume he's probably dead now. So like we find things occasionally that are like these dilemmas or these paradoxes or whatever. I mean, Mercury's orbit was a problem for classical mechanics. General relativity rescued that, but it's not like classical mechanics was wrong or disproven by Mercury's orbit. We just needed new information, new science, and in this case, a new theory to help us out with that. But this thing about beneficial mutations becoming fixed in the population, I don't know the specific numbers, but if we look at humans today, there are groups of humans that have particular beneficial mutations that other populations of humans don't have. People that live in Nepal, for example, it's an extremely high altitude country. You know, the Himalayas run through Nepal. They have particular gene differences within them that give them, that allow them to live at high altitude. And there's a really cool book called The Sports Gene. The guy's last name is Epstein, I believe. But it talks about the science behind, you know, how come all the great marathon runners come from this really small region of Kenya and Ethiopia? And how come, he does multiple examples like that. But those regions in Kenya and Ethiopia are also high altitude. So is Nepal. How come there aren't any great marathon runners from Nepal? There's also Peru and Chile with the Andes Mountains, but there really aren't any great marathon runners from there either. Each of these populations, they have different physiological differences, and in some of them, different genetic differences that allow them to live at high altitude. I don't remember specifically which is which, but I know that in one of these populations, they have a really high erythropoietin, or a really high amount of, erythropoietin, which is EPO. That's actually, when people say they're blood doping, that's what it means. They're injecting themselves with this hormone EPO. That's what Lance Armstrong did and all the cyclists. And so literally, it's just the hormone that makes your body make red blood cells. So one population, they just make more red blood cells. Now, that wouldn't make for a good runner because that actually makes your blood viscous and it increases the risk for clots. So you can't really have high blood pressure and high blood flow. It can actually become really dangerous with that. And obviously, if you're running marathons, you're going to have an elevated heart rate for, over 2 hours at a time. Anyways, all I'm saying is there are different kinds of beneficial mutations that don't have to exist in the entire species. So again, I don't know what Haldane specifically, how he ran his numbers with, what's the number, and I think he did this for humans, but like, what's the population of humans we're talking about? Because if it's 100 million people, that's very different than if it's only 1,000 people, for example.
Haldane was working with a population of 10,000 vertebrates, and he said with 10,000.
Okay, so if I had to let the video play just a little bit longer, 10,000 vertebrates, okay.
And we've got 8 billion. 10,000, it would take 300 generations for that mutation to be fixed in the environment.
Okay.
So we're going to make it even easier. We're not going to say 300 generations. We're going to go down to 1 generation. If you look on your paper, that's step number 4, 1 generation. So we're going to say it's every generation. That can't happen. It wouldn't happen. But we're going to say it's going to happen that fast.
Do you think he's aware? I know she won't be. I wasn't before I watched this video and I did the bare minimum amount of research. But is Eric going to present, again, this dilemma was proposed in the 50s. Did Eric look into any of the information that's come out since then to refute it? And are they going to bring that up? I mean, I guess we'll find out, but I kind of doubt it.
Just to make it easier for evolution. Well, now, how long is a generation? How many years old are you when you have a child?
Anywhere between 20 to 30.
20 to 30, yeah. Some people say 20s, 25, 30. We're going to go with the lower number to make it even easier. We're going to go with every 20 years. If you get 1 beneficial mutation every 20 years and you need 30 million beneficial mutations, how long would that take? We take the 20 times the 30 million, and number 7 gives us a total of.
So we'll just read this. How many years are required for 1 beneficial mutation? 20 years. Okay. Wait, what? How many generations? But that's just with 1 person. So you got to take this time. I got to let him go through because these numbers make no sense.
Number 7 is doing that math. 20 times 30 million.
20 times 30 million. Is that the 60?
Why are they taking 20 years times 30 million? I'm so confused.
600 million.
Okay, well, whatever. So it would take 600 million years to go from an ape-like ape-like creature into a human. A human is an ape-like creature, once again, for the millionth time. So it would take 600 million years. Okay, so that's the argument. I already know what I'm going to say, but let's listen to a little bit more.
Haldane said it would take way too long to get the beneficial mutations to go from an ape-like creature to a human being. We don't see it happen. So our argument is evolution is impossible. We don't see an ape-like creature evolving into a human.
So notice how this is so cute, how he's not dealing with any of the evidence of this, like the fossil record. He's just using an argument, or this dilemma is sort of, I mean, it's kind of, it's like these arguments for like irreducible complexity, or there's like these weird arguments about like how long would it take for the genome to randomly assemble into a form that would like be conducive for life or whatever. So they're not dealing with evidence. They're just using number games to try to propose something that can't be explained, which is literally just an argument from incredulity and ignorance.
Human being with enough time. According to the Evolution Worldview today, Lucy, one of our closest living relatives to apes, was 3.2 million years old. And even under these conditions, you need 600 million years. Evolution is impossible. Emma, we'd like you to try to prove us wrong.
Okay, I mean, when I was her age, I would have absolutely floundered with this. So I don't know. I guess we'll see how she does. So what are the problems with this, and what is with the outdated science, and what is Eric either forgetting or not accounting for or whatever? Well, there are a number of them. So Haldane, I have some notes written on this. Like I said, I looked this up before. So Haldane assumed, like, his framework is built on this concept of hard selection, where literally only organisms with beneficial mutations survive, which is absolutely not the case. We have soft selection. So that allows for multiple different kinds of beneficial mutations, but also variations in the population that have different degrees of fitness can all survive in the population. And it also takes this weird approach to genetics where it's sort of like the one gene for one trait kind of view, where only if this one trait is modified in this only if this one gene gets mutated in this one specific way and ends up in this to have a beneficial type of expression, that's the only way it can work. We know that genetics is so much more complicated than that. The vast majority of traits for an organism are polygenic, and there are multiple different forms that any trait can be expressed as. You take human height, or like literally almost any trait. For the vast majority of traits that organisms have, for their phenotypes or whatever, it's not how do you want to say, it's not binary, it's not this or that. They follow bell curves or normal distributions. So there are all kinds of degrees of fitness that an organism can have. It's also the case, I don't know how much this plays into the way this was calculated originally, but it's not the case that a mutation either works against fitness or works for fitness. The majority, for all we can tell, the majority of mutations actually don't have much of an effect on selection. So mutations actually, through what we just call genetic drift, literally just drift through a population and accumulate because they're not being selected for. It's just kind of this phenomena of dumb luck where certain allele frequencies are become more common because they're not being selected for or against. A good one is blood type. I think it's type B, but don't necessarily quote me on this. But Native Americans, for whatever reason, it was the most common blood type in them. I think it was B. Again, don't totally quote me on that, but there you go. Type O blood. That's a recessive allele, but I don't know if it's the worldwide most common blood type, but in the United States, I believe. You know what? Let's look it up. Most common blood types in the world. For the world is O positive followed by A positive. Boom, there you go. So that's literally a recessive allele, but your blood type is not that. There's certainly a reason for there being alleles for blood types. Maybe somebody knows. I don't know off the top of my head, but for them to exist. But it's pretty obvious that being type A blood doesn't mean you're more likely to survive as type O. And it hasn't been that way for a while. So populations, just for very random reasons, through genetic drift, you end up getting these alleles that become more common. Now that can be important because a pre-existing neutral gene at any point can mutate in a population, and then it can sort of start to spread. I don't know if that's really a good argument against what they're talking about. So, what else? So we've talked about the soft selection versus hard selection, the one trait. Oh, yeah. So, sorry, it's hard to keep track because of how many problems are with this. The fact that the way you increase or decrease whatever fitness with an organism in its population, yes, in large part comes down to genetics, but those genetics are very complex. It's a multitude of many genes working together. That's a really serious issue for this Haldane dilemma too, because what we have is we also have gene linkage, right? Well, there's recombination too. So like parents literally through sexually reproducing organisms, there's crossing over of genetic material. So there are recombinations that allow for genes to be mixed at a far faster rate than Haldane would have been able to have speculated, in his time. Let me read my notes a little bit just to get a sense of where I've been and what I need to talk about at this point. Right. Tim, Kent is as much a doctor as Dre. Yeah, Dr. G or Dr. Pepper. Many beneficial traits arise from recombining existing genetic information. Yes. Rather than waiting for new mutations. Yes. Okay. So the other thing I was going to say, I guess there's only one thing that I missed, is the fact that traits are polygenic. It helps and is a defeater for this kind of in this way. Let's admit, I don't know if any of you know a lot about machine learning, but let's say you were going to program a computer to be really good at chess. Well, you could program it to literally, like it could simulate matches one at a time. What you could do is simulate, what if I do one move at a time? Like it literally just goes through, it picks a random move, like it moves the pawn over here. I don't know chess lingo. So it moves the fourth pawn to position, whatever. And then it sees how that goes. If it's the first move in chess, it's really not going to matter one way or the other. And then it sees how the next move goes. So you have to get several moves into the game before you discover anything. And then it restarts and it restarts. That's going to be really excruciatingly slow. And there are really cool YouTube videos you can watch where people program. Is his name? It's not Code Monkey. Code Bullet, I think. He has a really cool YouTube channel, but he's done things where he programs he programs a AI thing to like be able to bowl, and it's so awkward and it takes so long because it has to go through all these trials. Now, anyways, what was really revolutionary was what they started doing, I think anyways, or maybe this wasn't done, but you can just imagine doing it this way instead. Instead of building like a artificial intelligence or whatever to try to get good at chess by doing one move at a time, one match at a time, program it to do a series of first steps throughout a series of different games, or have it program it to do sets of moves rather than one move at a time and simulate that multiple times. Genetics is a lot more like that because every single trait that is like a beneficial thing that increases fitness is the work of many, many genes working together. And we have the recombination of genes during meiosis, the production of sperm and egg cells. So what's really happening is, in a way, with our genetics, it's kind of like a lot of things are like they're not being tested, I wouldn't say. But how do I want to put it? The recombination of genes and the fact that traits are polygenic means that many different combinations are constantly being tested all at once. Well, not really being tested, but they're being put out into the environment. And then through natural selection, I guess actually we could say they're being tested. But all of this is happening at a vastly more complex level than this very simple way of looking at it, where it's like one gene, one trait, either beneficial or harmful. and either the gene gets passed on or it doesn't. No, it's many different genes. There's many different degrees of fitness. The genetic information is combined in many, many, many different ways. Well, it's combined sort of only through recombination in the one way, but the traits manifest in these complex symphonies of gene expression. So I kind of rambled there for a bit, but hopefully you can understand what I'm saying. It's not so limited and slow as they're making it out to be.
So my first question is, where are your sources?
Great question.
It's a good
If
question.
you go to evolutionismpossible.com, we've got them all laid out there in an incredible video, but John, I'll be happy to show you a couple of those.
Okay, I don't really need to see the clips. I just want to know, you said, so all the information that you've gathered for your side, where is that compiled from? Because I know it's compiled on...
Oh, something else I should say is that, so piggybacking on what I was saying earlier, you have a particular trait, and there are, like, you know, the trait can manifest itself in many different ways. But again, it's not because of one single gene in the population. It's through a combination of things. So, when I talk about that, though, I'm really kind of only talking about on an individual basis. But all of the different members of a population all have many different variances for many different traits. And there's no way to predict ahead of time how, like, this organism has this particular genetic combination and it fits well in its environment. It's not like an all-star or anything like that. But you take that organism, or member of the population, and then another member of the population, which has slightly different gene combinations than the other one. We all do. But they have the potential to reproduce, and the genetic variants that they will produce with their children are going to be variants that possibly have never been seen in the gene pool before. And because traits are the work of many genes working together, that has the potential to produce a extremely high degree of fitness in their offspring. And it's not because it got lucky enough to get that one gene that causes the greatest amount of fitness. It's because of the complex interplay of all of it. It's like combining in a supercomputer all these different chess strategies all at once to build the best like singular, well, it's not even singular, I guess, but the best sort of combination of moves you could use.
On the website, but who compiled that information? Where did you get that information? And what are their credentials?
That's good. That's a good question.
Her question is, where did we get the information for this? Where did that information come from? Sorry, we'll get sound at 12 o'clock. Sorry, we can't use amplification yet. Go ahead.
Okay, Emma, I think you're asking distinctly intelligent questions, and I wish every person asks those questions when they go on that stand.
Pretty good question. Like, are these creationists or secular scientists?
Usually what we get is somebody standing on that mic saying, I don't think that's possible. What's a more intelligent question to ask is, where is this information come from? And
But they're literally saying it's impossible. That's their argument.
I have no idea what he's doing.
We agree. People arguing like that is
Okay.
sad.
This guy who came up with this, his name is John Haldane. He did this in 1957 because in 1953 they found out that the structure of DNA is a double helix. Mm-hmm. And because they knew everything about DNA by then, which I can show you if you wish.
Oh, what kind of statement is that? By 1953, we knew everything about DNA? No, we didn't. Like, we didn't sequence any genomes. I mean, maybe we sequenced like a few bacterial genomes and viral genomes, like in the 90s or something. I know we were sequencing genes pretty like in the, I don't know about 60s, but that was going on in the 70s, because that's how Carl Woese was able to discover that the archaea exist, because they were able to sequence the sequence of nucleotides or whatever for this really weird ribosomal RNA sequence, and they found out that, oh, this one group of prokaryotes, they have one that's completely unlike anything else on the planet. That's how we discovered the archaea. But yeah, but no, to say back then we knew everything about we know everything about it. No, there's so much more that we know today. So yeah, that kind of, I wonder if that answers my question of, are they going to look at any of the rebuttals or whatever that there has been to Haldane's dilemma? And based on that, it sounds like no.
Suddenly what happened was that he wanted to find out how fast evolution takes place. And in this process, he discovered something he did not expect. But remember what people think of this guy. He is the Einstein of his day. He is considered the most intelligent biologist that ever lived. Not just some guy who was working
It's weird how I've never heard of him.
from his bedroom PC or something like that. He literally sat down and worked things out for years. So this guy knew exactly what he was talking about, and his information is credible. Based on information he has, he did a lot of research, and he discovered that 1,000 base pairs can only change and get fixed in the population within 300,000 generations. And that exploded across all the scientific fields.
Based on what they knew in 1957 and his assumptions, which we know today are false, sure. But yeah, this is so bad.
It was peer reviewed, he is very famous, and everybody
Okay, I'm going to do some skipping here.
accepted the conceptual. And when wrong, the motive, our intention is to open up your eyes. And I'm glad you're asking questions, and please continue asking. This is healthy.
No, your intention is to indoctrinate people into creationism.
Selection does not
I've seen this clip before, and they basically run out the clock on this woman. Not
produce
surprising, I
anything
guess.
through genetic drift. And the theory should be destroyed in our minds and be educated.
Emma, what else do you have?
So, can you give me the exact definition of what neutral selection is?
What natural selection is?
Neutral
selection. Do you have that on?
Yes, neutral selection is the idea that through neutral mutations, you can produce bigger and better things. That means you use genetic drift with neutral mutations in order for things to change. This guy's idea.
I don't think that's correct. My understanding of it is neutral selection. You can, I already explained this, but you can end up with certain genes widespread and sort of fixed in the population. But it's not due to natural selection. That's why we call it genetic drift. Because it's literally not, natural selection is not the accounting for how that gene gets fixed in the population. So I don't think he's describing that correctly, but it's possible that I'm wrong too.
Idea was, well, birds can fly because of neutral mutations. Neutral, that means it's neither harmful nor is it beneficial. Harmful mutations are things that destroy humanity. Beneficial mutations is what makes humanity better. He's saying neutral mutations is how it all worked. He wrote a book about it in 1983. And the opening line was, I'm writing this to convince you that through neutral mutations, all these wonderful things came about. The problem isn't the fact that he said that. The problem is that it was refuted as the means of resolving Haldane's dilemma.
So, may I ask you,
Sure.
I didn't really follow what the actual retort to anything she said was supposed to be there.
how is that not evolution?
How is that what?
How is that not evolution?
A neutral, well, again,
We have to
we're
define
dealing
evolution.
with macroevolution.
Yes.
So that would be microevolution. That would
Okay.
be a variation
Oh, so they believe in evolution. Okay, give her $1,000.
or an adaptation. I'm not against that. We agree with that. Actually, creationists came up with the idea of adaptation. So we're not against that at all.
May I ask another question?
Yeah.
So you said you're refuting the idea that one species cannot turn into another species.
Not one species, because we don't have a good definition of species. Scientists
Yes.
today don't have a definition of species that fits everything we see today.
Fair.
Yeah, you're
So
right.
not species. I'm using the word kind. The word
Okay.
kind are the original animals capable of reproduction. So that would be
Oh, okay. I didn't get what he meant by that at first, but now I
approximately with our modern kind of brand new classification system that we've only been using for a couple hundred years that Linnaeus came up with, approximately the family level. Not always, but approximately the family level. There's a whole field of science.
So the family level, so they have this blurry cutoff, which isn't a cutoff at all, just like species, and they say, yeah, it can't happen this way. Well, except, it can happen this way because not always, but it can't. So like it's like basically undisprovable. So the $1,000 that's really only $200 will never go to anybody for that reason. This is what we call a goalpost shift.
It's called baraminology that has actually gone back and categorized how many different original kinds of animals were there. Fascinating study. You can look that up on our website.
Okay, so let me figure out how to word this real quick. So you're saying one kind cannot become another kind.
The dog kind cannot become a different kind. I would say that, but Haldane, the evolutionary geneticist, is also saying that.
No, I don't believe that that's true at all. I think what Haldane is saying is that at his time, based on the assumptions that they were using, the math don't math. But that was all that, like, this is actually, scientists don't view that as like, oh no, like that kind of thing is welcome, because when we find a dilemma like that, we understand now that allows scientists to say, we have something we don't know, and then they go and investigate and discover new science and new facts about, in this case, biology that we didn't know before. It's literally motivation to learn better and new things, new and better things.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not just us. We've never seen it, tested it, demonstrated it. We've tried to make it happen. We have not been able to make it happen. They did the fruit fly experiment in the 1980s, raised 50,000 generations of fruit flies, never got anything better than the fruit fly.
I don't know what you mean by better. I don't know what this experiment is. If they like bombarded them with radiation, I mean, that's whatever. But also, evolution is proposed to take millions of, well, not for every single case, but definitely for, like, the evolutionary scientists agree that, like, you're not going to get something in one family turning into another family quickly or anything like that. And they're certainly not going to agree with, he didn't say this, but I feel like he's dumb enough to think that this is actually what evolution teaches. But, like, take two things in the same kind, dogs and, well, dogs and whales aren't both, by kind I mean family. They're not both carnivores, I don't believe, but I think that bears and seals are, and bears and seals are not cetaceans, pinnipeds. That's like seals and walruses. I think bears are their closest living relatives. But even an evolutionary biologist would agree that a bear will never turn into a seal, because that's not what it means to be related. It means that they share a common ancestor, right? And now I completely forgot where I was going. Oh, but, you know, an evolutionary biologist would agree that, well, we wouldn't expect to see something on the taxonomic level of a family appear, like, for that to be observable via an experiment. So this actually doesn't prove anything with regard to disproving evolution. This is the kind of thing that would take, is imagined to take millions and millions of years.
We've never observed evolution going from one kind to a different kind happening. We've seen variations. They got flies with curly wings, flies with small wings, red eyes, white eyes, all kinds of mutants of the fly. Never got anything better, and never anything other than a fly. So people today are being taught, hey, evolution is true, guys. Guess what, evolution? And they're teaching in the schools. They're using variation, microevolution, adaptation, and saying, oh, just trust us. If we wait long enough, the big evolution can happen. That's not science.
There's nothing not scientific about that. The claim that some processes take an extremely long amount of time, that's not scientific.
Okay, so going back, not animals or plants, but going back to the bacteria kingdom, every day there are new strands of bacteria, brand new, like, different types of bacteria. Bacteria evolves every day, and bacteria takes
Adapts,
days to...
changes. You're using the word evolve, and I'm saying that's an adaptation. I don't mind that. That's a variation. We've watched bacteria for 100 and some years, and we've never got it to be anything but a bacteria.
That's like saying, the problem with that is, that's like saying that, and this is odd because we think of bacteria so simplistically, but saying bacteria have never turned into not bacteria is not the same thing as saying we've never seen a dog not turn into a dog. What it's actually the equivalent of is saying, it's actually more extreme than this. It's the equivalent of saying we've never seen an animal turn into a plant, because they're both still eukaryotes, right? A bacteria is a prokaryote. So no, a bacteria, even to satisfy their macroevolution, whatever, a bacteria would still be a bacteria and satisfy their criteria, or whatever we want to call it, for the macroevolution. She's probably not going to realize that. And even if you said it to them, they would just probably go,
Now, if you want to believe the bacteria turned into something that's not a bacteria, that's fine, but that's a belief system.
So the issue
predicated on evidence
with bacteria is that bacteria is a kingdom, so anything that is bacterial falls under that kingdom.
Very good. I don't remember what her name is, but very good.
So saying that, and there are 3 kingdoms. There's the eukaryotes, there's the archaea, and then there's the bacteria. By saying we can't get anything other than a bacteria, technically you are right, but by definition, bacteria is the kingdom, which is the most broad subject. What I'm
So it's above family, so it would still satisfy their requirement.
talking about is under that broad subject, the same thing as eukaryotes, because eukaryotes are much more like diverse than bacteria. It's much easier to envision what you're saying through eukaryotes. Bacteria, under the family, genus, species, under all of that, we're seeing new different types of species, new genuses, new families every day, because they take days to evolve into different kinds of species, which I understand that species is a very broad term, as we don't really have a...
I need to speed this up. It's just painfully slow. Which, when you're trying to think of what you're going to say, yeah, it is hard to talk fast, but still.
Specific definition, you are right about that. As it is currently being defined, my understanding is a species is two organisms within the same species that can produce viable and high fitness offspring, so their offspring can reproduce. And that is why donkeys, mules, when they are bred, typically their species cannot reproduce. Same thing with like lions and tigers. They use organisms as well. I do just want to say, what's your explanation for that then, if we are seeing them variation every day?
Emma, somebody else is standing behind you. This lady's raising her hand, so we're going to move on. But I'm going to answer the question first.
Okay, he's going to answer the question.
I'm going to answer the question. Emma, do you think this evolutionist who believed in evolution he overlooked those things? You will find that he took everything into account. He took flowers, he took cattle, he took vertebrates, he took animals, he took humans, he took everything into consideration when he was...
Notice how he didn't say bacteria.
Working out what is required to work out the dates for the beneficial mutations to take place. The truth is, even if I were to ignore that, which we should not ignore.
But you are ignoring it because you didn't address what she said, you didn't mention bacteria in one at all, and you're moving on to the next person.
I've got here on the screen E. coli, which is the greatest experiment made by Richard Lenski, talking about bacteria and how they evolve. And it takes every 75 days, there are 500 generations. After 20 years, there are nearly 32,000 generations. Just one beneficial mutation you can get out of it, and that was to break the bacteria so that it can digest food that it could only digest under certain circumstances. Our point is that these examples you're bringing don't take away anything from what Haldane has done. He already believed in those things. He already believed beneficial mutations do happen.
Wow, she absolutely bodied them, and they're not even attempting to deal with what she said.
We have an argument about that. I think that it doesn't happen at all without fitness costs, but we're ignoring that. We're giving you all the possibilities like Haldane believed. So the truth is, these numbers don't lie. He took everything into consideration, and everything you said will only support what Haldane believed, because he already believed them. But here's the deal. He died an evolutionist. Does that say something about a guy who discovered that it doesn't work?
He didn't discover that it doesn't work because this dilemma doesn't undo all of the other empirical evidence, which, like I was saying earlier, are they going to disprove evolution by any, with any evidence, or with a dilemma, which is just a complicated argument from incredulity.
He is exactly the same as you. No matter what you tell him, he's not going to change his mind. You know why? Because it's a religious worldview. Only religious people don't change their minds after you show them the facts. And that is our problem today with our society and with our students.
What are you guys? What kind of statement is that? What kind of own goal is that? Oh man, I hope she responds to them in some way. Jake, thanks for the comment. I'm going to write you a comment real quick and then back to the video. Okay, back to the video. I think what I was telling Jake, everybody, is I figured out why my TikTok live streams on YouTube were so incredibly choppy and laggy. And it's because I had the bit rate set to 20,000 kilobits per second, which is about 4 times too high. So I lowered it.
You are the next generation. If you continue with this worldview and not willing to change your mind, then our world is not going to be a better place. You're simply going to dogmatically accept things that people tell you without investigating and only walk away.
The irony.
Ignorant instead of educated.
Okay.
That's what we want from you. Okay, Emma?
Do you mind if I...
Last thought, and we got to go to the
we
next
got people,
person.
yeah.
Okay. Do you mind if I challenge your worldview real quick?
That's not what we're here to do. Just
I understand that, but I'm saying, why do you
Tonight-
believe God and evolution are two separate things?
Because the God of evolution, even evolutionists would agree, would be a wicked, immoral God that used billions of years of death and suffering to finally get humanity, which is what he wanted.
God killed oh man, these guys actually have attempts to come up with numbers for how many people died in Noah's flood, and I've seen about 100 million before. So God reset the world population through that flood, killed like 100 million people according to them, in order to get humanity the way he wanted. That's very explicitly why he did it. So according to Eric Hovind, the God he believes in is evil.
So that's why they're incompatible. That's the short answer. Long answer is on the website there at Creation Today. If you do that, I did a whole thing called Theistic Evolution on Trial. You can watch the whole thing there. It doesn't fit scripture. It doesn't fit science. The God of evolution would not be a good God. Even evolutionists agree with that. Hey, Emma, you've done a great job. I really appreciate you talking to us. I do want you to realize a lot of people will bring up all kinds of other things to try not to argue with the sheer numbers. I want you to look into these numbers.
I don't necessarily think that would mean evolution is wrong.
Would you say that if these numbers are correct, that macroevolution, if it would take...
Cranky old cuber, don't know if you see this, but thanks for spreading the good word and making these science deniers look like the stupid losers they are. You're welcome. 600
million years to go from an ape-like creature to a human, would you agree the evolution worldview has major problems under those conditions?
I think the issue is, though, evolution, the way you're viewing it, is like, you're viewing it from like a more genetical, mathematical perspective. Evolution is very much heavily based on societal, environmental pressures, and evolution can happen at any speed.
Yeah, but that's circular reasoning. You're just saying evolution is true because evolution is true.
That's not even close to what she said.
Being very specific. We're saying adaptation in the way you described it is fine. But we're talking about evolution producing something other than its kind is numerically impossible. Would you agree if the premises that we have, if they're true, then it would be true? Would you agree with that?
I do understand where you're coming from with the numbers, and I do think with your numbers that...
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that the numbers are true.
Yes, I do understand your argument.
Is the new book out yet? Yeah, Facts That Aren't True. Facts That Aren't True has been out for like 2 weeks now. This live stream doesn't really have a description, but any of my recent videos have a direct link to it. And I still have, you can get a signed copy from my Shopify store still. I still have about 7 or 8 of them left to sell.
But I'm not sure where the numbers exactly are coming from. People disagree with the numbers. And I do think that if I sat down and did the math with you, I could like push my argument a little bit more.
You're not disagreeing with us, Emma. You're just disagreeing with the greatest biologist who ever lived. If that's what you want to do.
No, you disagree with the greatest biologist who ever lived, which I don't know if he was. Because he doesn't not believe in evolution.
To hold on to your belief, then do what you need to do.
Oh man, yeah. If only they would come to my town, right? Then that would be a lot of fun. So, man, that's about as much of that as I can take. So thank you everybody for being here. I'll stick around for a little bit for for a few audience questions from you guys in the chat, if you got anything. But if you have them, then bring those to me now. Bring me your questions. Running out of signatures, they are rare. Yeah, a little bit. Well, I'm just running out of physical copies of the book. Kind of mad you released signed versions after I bought your new book after you first announced it. I'm trying to think. The book went on sale before I got my physical hard copies. And I didn't know precisely what date the book would actually come out because the communication back and forth on that wasn't super. Well, wait a minute. No. I did. That's not exactly true. I announced the book was out the day I got the hard copies. It did technically go on sale before that. I just made a point not to say anything about it. But yeah, I don't think I directly announced the signature editions right away. So I don't know, a little bit of a sloppy release. Would I ever debate Eric Hovind? Yeah, I would have no problem doing that. Do I love you? I don't even know you. How long have I been playing guitar? About 20 years. Do you have Rocks Were There or Evolution Slam Dunk? I don't know what that meant. You mentioned that I believe in predeterminism, not refuting, but out of curiosity, what's the main driver in that belief of you? That there's nothing in the universe that isn't subject to the laws of physics. And there's no room for making free decisions that won't be guided by those laws of physics. So if you knew everything about the universe, you would know what's going to happen in the future. How do I maintain my sanity day to day? I don't know. Maybe I don't. Maybe I don't maintain it. One day Peterson will love me. I don't know. Why are people talking about slugs? All right, I can do one more question. I gotta sneeze. Big fan, love your writing and debating style and unwillingness to let the opponents change topics. Yeah, that is kind of what I'm known for. I don't know if I'm a good writer or not. That's kind of the weird thing. It's impossible for me to judge that because I wrote it. In fact, the more I read my writing, the more I dislike it. So, did Jesus kill the dinosaurs? Well, creationists think so. So, whenever that means. All right. Well, like I said, it was fun. Thank you all for being here. And I'll see you tomorrow in some form. Where's my outro? Here it is.